Hello, hello, Whiskers! Welcome to another episode of the Brothers Grimm series. Yes. Hello, hello, Whiskers! Welcome to another episode of the Brothers Grimm series. Click here for the link to the full playlist. So, let's get into it. This week we're doing Faithful John. So, once upon a time, a king lay on his deathbed, and he called in his most faithful servant, aptly named Faithful John. So once upon a time, a king lay on his deathbed, and he called in his most faithful servant, Faithful John, to speak to him his last wishes. And he told John that his son would soon be king, and to take him through every room in the palace, to take him through every corridor, every gallery, every room except one. And that is a special storeroom where the king has a painting of a beautiful princess, which the prince must never see. Because if the prince were to see this painting, he would fall instantly in love with the princess. And then, well, then the prince would follow her to the ends of the earth and be ruined forever. So Faithful John agrees to this, and soon the king dies. The new king is coronated, and Faithful John goes with him through the palace. He shows him every corridor and stops at that room and says, "No, my king, you may never enter here." And the king says, "If I do not enter, I will surely die of curiosity. I need to know what's inside." And he pushes Faithful John out of the way and he opens the door. And the first thing he sees is that painting of this beautiful woman. And he immediately asks John, "Who is she? I must meet her." And John explains that she's the princess of a nearby kingdom. The king decides that he must have her, and we have to find a way to woo her and to get her to be my bride. So John comes up with an idea. He has heard that the princess is very fond of gold things. So the king arranges for all the gold to be brought up from the catacombs of the palace and to be smelted into a golden wonder world. They create little birdies sculpted out of gold, and full stags with magnificent gleaming horns, and forests and trees and everything made of gold. And they load all of this onto a ship. Then they reach the princess's kingdom, and Faithful John says that they should be disguised as merchants. The king is hesitant of this idea, but the man's name is Faithful John after all, so he allows it. And Faithful John goes up to the palace, carrying two little golden birds. And he happens upon the princess. And then she loves the little birds, and she says, "Oh my word, they're so cute. I must have them. I simply must have them." And Faithful John explains that actually he and his master are merchants, and they have a whole ship full of these golden sculptures. And the princess is so intrigued, and she says, bring it up, I have to have it all." And Faithful John says, "No, no, my lady, that would take weeks. There is really a lot of gold. You have to come down to the ship and see it yourself, and then we can sell it to you." So the princess agrees, and she follows John down to the docks, where where the king, disguised as a merchant, shows her around the wonderland, and they spend all morning below decks. When she comes up, however, to return home, there is nothing but deep blue ocean around her. "I've been kidnapped!" she yells, until the king reveals his true identity. Seeing that they are equals, the princess is okay with the situation, and she agrees to return and marry him. So Faithful John is steering the ship on their way home, and then he hears some squawking that he recognizes as words. There are three ravens sitting on the mast and talking to each other, and Faithful John overhears them. The first one says the king will never survive. As soon as he gets back, there will be a chestnut horse. And if he mounts that horse, the horse will run away with him right off the cliff and he will die. Faithful John hears this, and the second raven squawks. If he happens to survive that, there's a second trick in store. On the table of their feast for their wedding night, there will be a garland of silver and gold, but really it will be acid. And if anybody touches it without a glove, they will burn. And the king will place it on his head, and his skin will melt off his skull. Faithful John makes note of this, and the third raven said, and even if he happens to survive that, he will yet not be happy. For that night, the princess will dance, and then fall suddenly faint. And she will not survive. She will not awaken unless somebody draws 3 drops of blood from her breast. But none of this can ever get out, the ravens squawk to each other. For whoever speaks these words to the king will turn to stone. So Faithful John hears this and speaks not. But when they arrive on the beach and a chestnut horse comes galloping forward, the king announces that he will ride the horse to the palace. This is surely a good omen. And Faithful John says, no, you will not. And he grabs a pistol off the holster of the horse and shoots it, dead. And the other servants are appalled to kill this beautiful and innocent creature for no apparent reason. But the king reminds them that John has always been faithful. And they walk up to the palace. Next, the king sees a beautiful golden and silver garland at the feast table. But before he has time to reach for it, Faithful John has donned some gloves and he grabs it and chucks it in the fire. And again, the servants are appalled, destroying the king's gift from an unknown admirer. How dare you? But the king again says, is his name not Faithful John? He can be trusted. So then the third thing happens, and the princess falls faint while dancing. She's taken up to her room, and while lying unconscious, Faithful John reaches down and sucks 3 drops of blood from her breasts, spitting it out onto the ground. The king sees this, and his patience is finished. He immediately sentences Faithful John to death. He says, tomorrow you will burn at the stake. But the princess awaits, and she's alive, and all is well. So the next morning, Faithful John is tied to the stake, and just as the king is about to light the fire, Faithful John asks, can I not have what each dying man deserves? Can I not speak my final words? And the king allows it. What could happen? And Faithful John tells of the 3 ravens, and as he speaks, stone starts to creep up from below, covering his feet as he tells about the chestnut horse, and then up to his knees when he speaks about the garland, and then up to his chest when he speaks about the princess, and then finally he is engulfed as he explains about the 3 drops of blood that had to be drawn from her breast, and how he could never tell the king. And the crowd stands in shock. The king, feeling very guilty about his distrust in Faithful John, arranges for this stone statue to be held in his quarters. So every night before they go to sleep, they gaze upon the face of faithful John, who saved them both. And after not too long, the king and the princess, or I guess queen now, have twins. They have two lovely little boys. And the king is content. But one day he's staring at the statue and just speaking to himself. If only I could have trusted you. If only there was a way to save you. But suddenly the statue speaks, and faithful John, in stony facade, says, there is a way, but you need to kill your twins. You need to take this sword and chop their heads off, and then sprinkle the blood from their necks on my forehead. And the king considers this. He considers his children and his love for them. He considers his wife and his love for her. He also considers all that faithful John has done for them both, and decides to kill his kids. So he takes a sword and right there in front of John, cuts both their heads clean off. He takes blood from both of their necks and sprinkles it on the statue's forehead, where John is then revived. He immediately kneels by the children, sticks their heads back on, and then rubs at the necks until they are healed again and the children are alive. The queen then comes back and sees all the blood, asks what happened, and the king tells her the whole story. And she is happy that faithful John survives, and she is happy with the king's decision as well. And so, for once, they all lived happily ever after. So, little bits of the story are familiar, are they not? Where else have we heard of a precocious young prince who really wants the pretty girl and who is willing to risk anything to have her, and who steals her away on the ship? If only the Trojans had someone like faithful John to save them from the Greeks. Yes, this story smacks a lot of Helen of Troy, but it is a different story, so let's go into the morality of this story specifically. So this story essentially is trust. Trust in those who have always been faithful. Trust in those who have no reason to cause you malice. Trust is built over years and years. Do not let it be destroyed over one small incident. Okay, but let's think about this. The king finds faithful John hunched over his unconscious wife, seemingly sexually assaulting her. I think that would give anyone pause. That would give anyone reason to distrust your intentions. So I completely understand the king's motivation there of maybe not having him killed, but definitely excising him from the palace at the very least. I mean, that's not acceptable behavior. So how can we look at it with today's morality? I think this is less a single story than an archetype. We all know this. It's in rom-coms, it's in comedies, it's in everything. The low point, the point where the two friends just have some misunderstanding because they can't tell each other something. And the mentor or the guardian has done something out of character, and we can't trust him anymore because of this. It's usually a plot contrivance, easily solved by some decent communication, but in this case, as in many of those, there's a specific reason why that communication seems impossible. And so the story here is there would not have been any conflict if you had just trusted your friend and trusted that the people that love you and that whom you love would want the best for you, and you can trust their intentions to always be pure. So there are a couple of things I can say. First, never attribute malice to what could easily be chalked up to stupidity. People often don't mean harm when they do harm. Just sort of, yeah. It's sort of difficult to explain without an exact example, but you can remember this when somebody has done something that doesn't seem like them. Was it an accident or was it specifically meant to hurt you? I think there is reason to pause, to think twice about somebody who has never previously done you any harm or had cause to do you any harm. People sometimes cause harm without meaning to, and a little charitability can go a long way towards saving a friendship. I know I sound like a fortune cookie, but it's easier for me to remember these types of things in moments of passion. When I'm angry at somebody for standing me up, I can remember a little bit of charitability can save a friendship and never attribute malice to something that could easily be chalked up to stupidity. Are they bad at their calendar? Can I give them a call and ask them, what the hell? Where are you? Do they hate me all of a sudden? Probably not. And it's much easier for me to remember this type of thing when they're in short snippets like that. When it's just a little verse that can pop up in your head and stop you from causing an unnecessary fight, from being hurt by something that didn't mean to hurt you. So I hope for you a little bit of charitability can go a long way towards saving a friendship. And I hope these little things will pop up and allow you to reconsider in the future. If someone has always been faithful, it makes sense to think that they'd be faithful again. Okay. Bye, Whiskers.